Hey guys, tonight we're setting sail for one of the gentlest, and most mysterious, chapters in ancient history. Picture this, it's sunset over the Aegean Sea, and you're standing atop a broad stone terrace, high above the city of Knossos. The wind smells faintly of thyme and wet limestone. Clay rooftops shimmer golden under the sun's final sigh, while below, a caravan of donkeys plods through winding alleys stacked with crates of saffron, copper, and, oddly enough, figs wrapped in waxed palm leaves. You're in Crete, around 1600 BCE, and no, you're not carrying a sword. Instead, you're one of the Minoan maritime traders, equal parts merchant, diplomat, and vibes manager. Your job? Keep goods moving and neighbors smiling without ever building a wall or starting a war. That sounds peaceful. Until you remember this is the ancient world, and nobody stays peaceful for long. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake at dawn in Knossos, stretching beneath a canopy dyed with crushed murex shells, deep, royal purple. The palace above you isn't cold or militaristic. No grim barracks. No defensive towers. Just bright frescoes of dolphins, youths in acrobatic poses, and swirling red and blue motifs that make you feel like you've been dropped into an art museum curated by someone who really loved the ocean and possibly mushrooms. Your sandals click against warm stone as you pass merchants carrying amphorae etched with octopi, priests whispering prayers to a goddess who may or may not be holding a snake, and children skipping rope with plaited grass. The air is heavy with the scent of baked barley, olive pressings, and the faint ammonia tang of freshly cleaned fish guts. And then there's the hum of the port, your real destination today. Downhill, the harbor glows like a puddle of melted bronze. Ships rock gently, their sails drawn and tied like folded wings. Crew members shout over gull cries, loading fragrant oils, painted ceramics, and scrolls sealed in wax, destined for Egypt, the Levant, and sometimes even far-off Sicily. You can't help but marvel at how wide the Minoan reach is, all without ever raising a spear. That's your role: soft touch, firm handshake, impeccable sandals. But let's not pretend this is effortless. Historians still argue whether Minoan diplomacy was a result of strategy or geography. Was it because the island was rich and hard to invade? Or did their navy, still debated in its size, quietly enforce peace through presence alone? Either way, you've been trained well. You carry no weapons, but your eyes are sharp. You know which city-state prefers red wine, who's been arguing over cedar rights in Byblos, and how many goats to offer before negotiating with a Hittite emissary. It's a dance. And you've learned the steps. The best part? Everyone kind of likes you. Minoans, with their strange script, linear A, their elegant flounced robes, and their reputation for divine ceremonies, are welcomed like celebrity chefs in most ports. You don't push religion. You don't annex territory. You just bring cool stuff, compliment the locals' frescoes, and throw memorable feasts with honey-soaked barley cakes and flute music. There's even a rumor, though no one's confirmed it, that the pharaoh of Egypt commissioned a fresco in Minoan style for a private bathhouse. Why? Maybe he just liked the dolphins. Still, there are things you don't talk about, like the earthquakes, or the way the sea sometimes pulls back unexpectedly and crashes in with enough force to scatter stone blocks like dice, or how the older traders say they once saw ships leave Crete, never to return, not due to pirates or storms, but silence. Disappearance. The kind that smells faintly of ash and salt. But for now, the sun is shining. And as you prepare for your next diplomatic voyage, you take a moment to stand at the edge of the dock and feel the wind roll off the sea like a sigh from something ancient and restless. You tuck a small figurine of the snake goddess into your sash, part charm, part insurance policy, and board your ship. The sails bloom like cream-colored petals. The crew sings low and slow, a rhythmic chant that sounds like waves speaking your name. And just like that, Knossos disappears behind you, swallowed by the golden haze of early morning. You're not off to conquer. You're off to convince. No sword, no shield. Just silence, timing, and a boat full of finely painted jugs. You're 3 days into the voyage now, and the sea's rhythm has worked its way into your bones. Each creak of the ship's cedar beams is as familiar to you as your own breath. The wind, fickle but mostly kind, bellies the sails in a slow sway that keeps you aimed southeast, toward a Cypriot harbor known for its copper exports and overly salted octopus stew. Your vessel is slim but stable, A masterpiece of jointed planks sealed with pitch and reinforced with rope lashings. It's built for speed and cargo, not battle. There are no rams at the prow, no archers perched on deck. Just amphorae. So many amphorae. Some hold oil so rich it glows in the dark. Others cradle sweet wine, or resin, or precious saffron bundled in linen and tied with bone pins. You've packed some obsidian too, black volcanic glass from the islands north of Crete, sharp enough to slice through hide, or rival traders' egos. And no, you didn't bring a single soldier. Not even a dagger. That's not your way. Minoan ships sail not under threat, but under reputation. Your people are known across the Aegean as the ones who arrive on time, pay in full, and throw a killer afterparty. That buys you protection, or so you hope. The only person aboard with any muscle worth noting is Aretas, the helmsman, who has shoulders like tree trunks and spends most of his day humming love songs to the sea. He once broke up a Barbral entire by lifting a rival trader off the ground and gently placing him outside. I don't fight, Aretas likes to say. I relocate. The crew respects you. Not because you're tough, but because you're smart. You remember which cities prefer goats over linen, who thinks bronze should be bartered by weight versus volume, and where the best fig cake is made, hint, not in Cyprus. But diplomacy on the water isn't just about cargo and charm. You have to read signs. Last night, just before sleep took you, you noticed a faint glow on the horizon, red and flickering, like a fire far away. Probably just a cooking flame on another ship, but still. It nags at you. Minoan traders, for all their civility, live in a world where pirates are real and the gods are moody. You've heard tales of ships burned in the harbor by jealous Mycenaean rivals. Whispers that the quiet diplomacy of Crete only works because somewhere, hidden or forgotten, is a war fleet that hasn't been needed. Yet, historians still argue whether the Minoans truly lacked a military, or if their navy was simply never recorded in stone because it was meant to be forgotten. After all, silence is a powerful tool, especially when it's deliberate. You look out across the deck. The amphorae are tied in tight clusters, padded with straw and seaweed. The crew lounges in patches of shade, weaving palm fronds or playing knucklebones. One of them hums a tune in a mode that always makes you feel like you're already half asleep. It's nice. Almost boring. And that's when the seabirds vanish. No cause. No fluttering. Just an empty patch of sky where they used to be. Aretas notices it too. His humming stops. He tilts his head, listening. Storm? You ask? No. Something else, he murmurs, gripping the tiller with both hands. The sea's thinking. Thinking? You raise an eyebrow. But he's right. The waves are heavier now, slower, as if the sea were holding its breath. You scan the horizon. Nothing but glinting blue and a low swell that keeps rocking you side to side. Then, suddenly, another ship. It breaks the edge of the water like a scarab beetle gliding across glass. It's fast, lean, and its sails are too tight. Mycenaeans? Maybe. Or some ambitious Easterners looking to swipe a few jars of oil and call it a good day. You don't reach for a weapon. Instead, you nod to the crew. They know the drill. Slow down. Act casual. Show the cargo, because here's the trick. You're not valuable because you're defensible. You're valuable because you're connected. To raid you is to offend half the eastern Mediterranean. Everyone loves Minoan traders, Egyptians, Syrians, even the Hittites when they're not busy sword measuring with each other. You're the thread that ties them all together, quietly, with woven linen and clever smiles. So you float there. Vulnerable. Peaceful. Exposed. And the other ship? It keeps sailing. A wave goodbye. Or maybe just a glance of mutual acknowledgement. You're in the same game, after all. Quiet power. Invisible influence. And for now, that's enough. By dusk, Cyprus is a pink smudge on the horizon. The crew cheers. The birds return. Aretas hums again. You sit back against a bundle of rope, staring at the clouds. No war, no chaos, just the open sea, your own heartbeat, and the faint scent of cloves escaping through the wax seal of a cracked amphora. You're seated cross-legged beneath a linen awning now, a cup of date wine in hand and a diplomatic grin warming your face. The Cypriot evening air is thick with the scent of roasting lamb, pine resin, and perfume made from crushed iris bulbs. You're the guest of honor at a banquet thrown not for treaties or alliances, but for something far more delicate, understanding. This is how Minoan diplomacy works. You don't bring scrolls to sign or flags to raise. You bring honeyed figs, painted bowls, soft sandals that don't clomp across marble floors. Your presence is your politics. And in this moment, Every bite you take is part of a quiet conversation. The local ruler, a stout man with golden rings braided into his beard, is speaking animatedly about copper yields and the new workers he's importing from the mountains inland. You nod, sip, smile. You compliment his temple's new murals, comment on the clever drainage channels you passed on the way in. It's all soft gestures, but it's working. That's the secret, soft gestures that ripple far. Because even though you're thousands of years from modern diplomacy, you know what every seasoned negotiator eventually learns. People like people who make them feel interesting. Still, this isn't just dinner. It's a test. Everyone at this feast knows her ship is light on guards. They've heard the stories. Minoans don't conquer, don't threaten. Some say they don't even believe in borders. So why trust them? Because you listen. You share. And, most critically, you make yourself useful without being overbearing. It's an art. That amphora of wine you presented earlier? You made sure it came from a vineyard the local priest once visited during his youth. That dyed tunic you gifted the prince? Woven in the very pattern favored by his grandfather, who once traded with your uncle in Knossos. You didn't just bring goods. You brought memory. Historians still argue whether Minoan influence across the eastern Mediterranean was due to power or presence. Did they control ports through clever maneuvering, or were they simply so likable that no one wanted to upset them? Tonight, you feel the answer is both. The music picks up, a lazy plucking of strings, hollow and sweet, and dancers emerge, faces painted with ochre and their arms flowing like kelp. You clap, not too loudly, and watch the way the nobles lean toward you, as if your opinion of their entertainment actually matters. It does. You're not here to make demands. You're here to be indispensable. At one point, a merchant from the Anatolian coast leans over, a little drunk, and says, "You Minoans. You never shout. Never stab. Yet somehow, you always get what you want." You smile and then whisper, "We only shout when the wind doesn't listen." That turns a laugh into a refill of your cup. But behind the laughter is a deeper truth. Your diplomacy is disarming. It makes people forget that trade is power. That your ships move between kingdoms without tribute, your wares show up in tombs and temples alike, and your palace at Knossos has storerooms so vast they make pharaohs jealous. In this world, where most alliances are forged with blades and blood, you've mastered something rare, quiet influence. And yet, there's always risk. You hear it in the cautious way the Cypriot prince mentions a recent skirmish with pirates near the western coast. You notice the guard by the wine jugs tonight is wearing newer armor, and his spear isn't just ceremonial. Someone's been testing the edges of this piece. One wrong move, one sign of weakness, and all your careful feasting and flattering could come undone. The amphora you carry might not be seen as gifts, but loot. You're reminded of something your old mentor used to say: diplomacy is a game of masks, and only the patient survive. So you keep your smile steady. You compliment the dancers. You raise your cup at the right toasts. You pretend not to notice the sideways glances between the merchant and the guard. Because this is how you win allies. One course at a time. And eventually, just as the moon rises and the feast begins to quiet, the prince leans forward and says the line you've been waiting for all night. "Next month, I plan to send copper north. I'd rather it travel with your ships." There it is. The soft alliance. No ink. No treaty. Just trust, built over roasted lamb and offhand compliments. You nod as if you're merely thinking it over, though you'd already cleared space in your hull before docking. It's funny. You probably won't get your name carved on any temple walls. You're not a warrior or a king. But centuries from now, archaeologists will dig up Minoan pottery in cities you never even visited and wonder how it got there. They'll search for signs of war, conquest, a bloody trail of expansion. And they won't find one, just delicately painted jugs. And maybe a faint smell of wine. You wake the next morning with the taste of wine still in your mouth and the feel of diplomacy humming in your chest like the low echo of a temple gong. The ship is ready. The amphorae are stowed. And the copper, gleaming ingots shaped like stretched ox hides, is nestled beneath woven mats, each piece stamped with a Cypriot mark of origin and one discreet swirl from your own knuckles. No documents. No contracts. Just symbols, reputation, and a soft nod. As your vessel slips from the Cypriot harbor and back onto the Aegean, the coastal breeze carries the scent of thyme and hot stone, and for a moment, you feel unstoppable. Until you glance back and remember something that still baffles the more aggressive cultures of the mainland: Knossos has no walls. No fortress. No towers. No citadel crowning the hilltop. Just sprawling corridors, open courtyards, and palatial walls covered in art, not spikes. You've passed through plenty of places ringed with jagged defenses, places where you can't walk 5 paces without a guard shadowing your heels. But in Crete, the palaces are designed like honeycombs, airy, elegant, and strangely serene. Historians still argue whether this was arrogance or confidence. Were the Minoans so sure of their naval dominance that they didn't need land defenses? Or were they protected by subtler things, like trade networks, religious influence, or simply good PR? Because here's the thing, walls make enemies. And you? You're in the business of friends. You remember what it felt like the first time you stood in the central court of Knossos. The sun casting latticed shadows through high colonnades. The polished flagstones warm underfoot. The strange sensation that the whole palace was designed not to keep people out, but to welcome them in. Of course, not everyone was impressed. You once escorted a Mycenaean envoy through the palace. He scoffed at the lack of battlements and muttered, "So what happens when someone attacks you?" You replied, "We serve them wine and invite them to dance." He didn't laugh. But that's the difference. While the mainlanders hoard swords and dig moats, you're investing in scent, in texture, in the quiet diplomacy of design. Even your scripts whisper more than they shout. Take Linear Ray, that beautiful, maddening script scratched into clay tablets and painted across temple walls. To this day, no one really knows what it says. Not modern scholars. Not your rivals in Mycenae. Not even half the scribes who write it. It's not meant to be public. It's not meant to intimidate. It's meant to record, to structure, to connect. And when those records are sealed in jars, stowed in storerooms beneath the palace, and never read again, well, maybe that's part of the point. You don't need to broadcast your power. You only need to know where it is when the time comes. Still, there's a fragility to this. You can feel it in the way your homeland stretches out like an open hand, elegant, but exposed. You think of the island villages that trade under your name but keep weapons under their beds. The priests who chant for calm seas, but quietly burn extra offerings when the moon is wrong. The whispers that, somewhere far to the north, the Mycenaeans are building ships not for trade, but for conquest. But then the wind shifts, and you spot another Minoan ship on the horizon. The telltale white sail and spiral motif. You recognize the pattern, it's Demetra's crew. You shared a dock with them last year near Ugarit and argued for hours about the merits of cedar versus cypress. They spot you too. A quick dip of the sail. A shared gesture. No messages. No drawn swords. Just 2 silent embassies passing in peace. That's what safety looks like, for now. But peace, you've learned, is always a tide. It ebbs. It returns. And somewhere beneath the surface, old currents twist. Back home, the palace remains unwalled. But in your chest, a few stones are starting to stack up, just in case. The moment you touch the waxy scroll in your satchel, the one with ink still damp from a Cypriot scribe's fingers, you're reminded of just how strange it is that nobody can fully read your own script. Linear A, elegant and curling like seafoam, sits useless in your lap unless you already know what it says. You were taught just enough to recognize trade tallies, god names, and a few personal markers. But even you can't read half of what's scratched into palace ledgers. No one can. Not then. Not now. Not even thousands of years later. It's one of history's great puzzles. And yet, commerce thrives. Communication flows. Somehow, diplomacy doesn't care that the writing system is, essentially, an inside joke that only the Minoans ever understood. Or maybe not even them. Toward the end, you tilt the tablet under the sunlight and trace your finger across a cluster of symbols, one that looks like a comb, another like a mountain, and a third that might be a goat or just a stylized shrug. These represent a shipment of dyed wool and bronze chisels heading toward the southern Aegean. Or, possibly, a recipe for turnip stew. Who's to say? But here's the weird part, it doesn't matter. People still trust you. They trust your cargo. Your reputation. Your timing. Because the truth is, diplomacy doesn't always need full translation. Sometimes a painted octopus on a jug is enough. Sometimes a silence between phrases, a knowing glance, or a perfectly timed gift does what 10 signed treaties can't. You learned this firsthand at a port near the Levant. You were just a junior trader then, your first trip outside Crete. You dropped a crate of perfume oils, one that cost nearly a year's salary to replace. Your heart sank. Your knees did, too. But the local port master didn't scream. He just scooped up a handful of sand, let it run through his fingers, and said, "You'll bring more." That was the deal. Not written. Not signed. just understood. Historians still argue whether the Minoan script was intentionally exclusive or simply underdeveloped. Was it sacred? Administrative? Was it ever meant to be read aloud? Or was it more of a talisman, something to be carried rather than spoken? Whatever the truth, you've learned how to work around it. At your next stop, you don't hand over documents. You hand over gifts. Not bribes, gifts. There's a difference. Bribes are expected. Gifts are remembered. A bolt of linen with a blue spiral motif. A tiny carved bowl of polished greenstone. A pouch of saffron, its threads redder than blood and lighter than whispers. You offer these things not with pomp, but with timing. You wait for the moment between courses. The lull in conversation. The silence between two toasts when everyone's mouths are full and no one's guard is up. That's when you present your gift, wordlessly. And suddenly, you're not just a trader. You're a presence, a memory. You think back to a time in Knossos when you were helping organize the archive room. The head scribe, old, nearly blind, smelled like melted beeswax and fermented olives, told you, words rot. Impressions stay. You didn't quite get it then. You do now. Even as linear grows less useful outside of your own palace walls, your gestures grow stronger, because diplomacy, especially the Minoan kind, is about what lingers after you've left port. The taste of the wine you brought. The way your jug held water just a bit cooler. The weight of the carved soapstone pendant you left behind. Even now, as your ship drifts toward the next harbor, you don't fret about the fact that the scrolls in your satchel might as well be blank to most people. You lean back against the hull, watching the sea shimmer like scales, and you whisper to yourself, they don't need to read it, because they already read you. And that's the part they remember. The hem of your robe flutters in the sea breeze as you step ashore in Thera, your next port of call. The sun is merciless here, brighter, sharper somehow, and the ground beneath your sandals crunches with volcanic grit. But your landing is met not with spears or scribes, but with smiles, outstretched hands, and a flurry of compliments about your sash. This, you suspect, is not just because of your trading skill. It's because of your outfit. Minoan fashion travels faster than your ships. You catch a reflection in a polished bronze shield someone left leaning against a crate, layered linen in soft saffron, stitched with sea blue threads that catch the light when you move. You wear cuffs of coiled bronze, and your hair is tied back with a strip of dyed wool that smells faintly of fig leaf and goatskin dye. You look good, but more importantly, you look foreign, exotic, elevated, Minoan, because in a world where half of diplomacy is saying things without words, clothes matter. And the Minoans? They are masters of the silent message. Historians still argue whether fashion was a conscious diplomatic strategy or just a cultural quirk. But you've seen too many sidelong glances and whispered compliments to believe it's accidental. You remember an incident in Byblos when a Phoenician noblewoman stopped an entire banquet just to ask about your belt clasp, a double-horn bronze piece shaped like the sacred bull. That 10-second exchange gained you an invitation to a private storeroom and a 5% discount on cedar planks. You didn't say a word. That's Minoan chic. You notice it spreading, too. The tunics in Thera now have brighter hems. Someone's painting dolphins on their house walls. There's even a merchant wearing a sash with a suspiciously familiar wave motif. They're copying you. And that's exactly what you want. Because when they dress like you, they think like you. When they paint like you, they remember you. You're not just selling oil and perfume anymore. You're selling identity. And fashion, like diplomacy, always leaves a trace. You stroll through the market stalls, the scent of roasted lentils and grilled fish heavy in the air. A potter tries to hand you a jug with geometric patterns, red spirals, white dots, vaguely Minoan but a little off. You smile politely, set it down. Close, but not quite. Still, imitation is flattering and useful. You spot a mural in progress on a plaster wall, a bull leaper, mid-arc, twisting above a stylized beast. It's clearly inspired by Knosson designs, though the anatomy is a bit tragic. You make a mental note to praise it anyway at dinner. Praising someone's bull leap mural is like complimenting their child. It doesn't have to be accurate, just kind. And speaking of children, a group of local kids darts past you, laughing and trailing ribbons. One of them is wearing a cloak with Minoan-style embroidery. You pause. Is it possible that in another generation, the people of Thera will feel more Minoan than their own grandparents? Not because of force, but because of fabric, of color, of choice. Back at the dock, one of your crew members grumbles that the Therans are copying us again. You shake your head. They're becoming us, you correct. And you mean it, because power isn't just what you control. It's what you inspire. That night, you're seated in a guest villa overlooking the sea. The meal is modest, lentils, grilled squid, a plum wine that's a little too sweet, but the conversation is warm. Your host gestures at your sandals and says, "Where did you get those straps? I've never seen weaving like that." You smile. He doesn't know it, but that question just turned him first rights to your next batch of obsidian. Fashion diplomacy wins again. The harbor is calm when you arrive at your most prestigious destination yet, the black-watered city of Egypt. Not the parched deserts inland, but the glittering Nile Delta, where palms sway over harbors crammed with sails, bronze glints from breastplates and bangles, and every wall seems to murmur of old power and divine approval. You dock beside a vessel flying the Eye of Horus on its mast cloth. You've barely tied off the ropes before two guards, barefoot but gold-collared, descend to inspect your ship. They're not interested in your weapons. You don't have any. They're interested in your ceramics. The taller one picks up a Minoan stirrup jar, turns it over, sniffs the wax seal, and then grunts in approval. "Perfumed oil," you say. "Sweet myrtle, pressed in Crete." He doesn't answer, but he doesn't break the jar either. That's a good sign. Egypt isn't hostile. Not exactly. It's more like amused by you. You're the curious cousin from across the sea, rich, mysterious, and always dressed a little oddly. You remember the first time you came here. The scale of it nearly knocked the breath out of your lungs. Temples taller than any palace back home, columns like tree trunks covered in animal-headed gods, and statues staring down at you with thousand-year-old eyes. You felt small. But not afraid, because your amphorae were invitations. Your linens were ambassadors. And the Egyptians, despite their grandeur, welcomed beauty wherever it sailed from. Historians still debate whether Minoans were officially recognized by the pharaoh's court. Some say you were just 12th-day visitors. Others argue Minoan-style frescoes in places like Avaris prove you had deeper influence. A few go further, wondering aloud if Cretans once danced in Pharaoh's own halls. You're not sure, but you do know this: when you present your jar of saffron to the scribe at the customs house, he smells it, eyes wide, and says, "We haven't had this since the red ships last came." Red ships. That's you. Your sails are always painted that earthy, clayish red. No one else does that. No one else dares. Too hard to maintain, they say. But for you, it's part of the brand. As you walk through the docks toward the merchant quarter, your sandals clacking on stone polished by generations, you're aware of the eyes on you. Not suspicious, curious, respectful. Your destination is a modest villa tucked between two granaries. It's the home of Nutmeg, a grain broker who speaks Minoan better than some of your cousins. He greets you like an old friend, pulling you inside, offering a seat on a pillow-stuffed bench, and summoning a servant with date cakes and cooled beer. "No gifts?" he asks, joking. You pull a small obsidian razor from your pouch. He laughs. "Of course not. You never come empty-handed. Business is quick." He agrees to facilitate the sale of your perfume and linen in exchange for wheat and, if you're lucky, a few scrolls of papyrus for scribes back in Knossos. But as always in Egypt, the real prize isn't the grain. It's the audience. 3 days later, you stand in the outer court of an estate attached to one of the minor temples, nothing grand, but still lined with painted lotus blossoms and guarded by statues of Sekhmet and Bastet. A low-ranking priest has summoned you. You're not sure why, but you know better than to refuse. You present your finest painted jar, blue spirals over cream clay, filled with oil and capped with a shell-inlaid lid. He doesn't touch it. Just nods. "You came last year," he says. "Your people are known." That's all he says. Then you're dismissed. And yet, somehow, you know you've won something. Not an alliance, not a treaty, but space. Legitimacy. Familiarity. The kind that keeps your ships from being searched too closely. That makes sure your goods are displayed in favorable stalls. That earns a subtle nod from a gold-collared official on your next arrival. You don't conquer Egypt. You become part of its decor. And for a Minoan, that's the quiet dream, to be noticed, remembered, and gently adored, without ever being envied enough to be invaded. As you leave the harbor days later, your ship weighed with grain and your satchel heavier with rumor, you notice a child waving a fan on the dock. It's made of woven reeds, painted with a dolphin. You didn't bring that. They made it here. They're making you here. And that's more powerful than any army. You're sailing home now, your ship heavy with Egyptian wheat, bundles of papyrus, and the faint, lingering scent of lotus oil that somehow refuses to leave the hull. The sea is calm. Too calm. You shift the tiller slightly and glance up at the sail. It catches just enough wind to move you northward, but there's a tension in the air. The kind you feel when something is about to happen, but hasn't quite yet. Erataz notices it too. He doesn't sing today. Instead, He checks the ropes 3 times before sunrise and mutters that the dolphins haven't shown up. Superstition? Maybe. But out here, even the calm can be a warning. You're halfway between the Levant and Crete when you spot another vessel on the horizon. Sleek, purposeful, and painted with the stark angular patterns that scream Mycenaean. They've been growing bolder. You've heard the rumors in every port, stories of mainlanders accidentally taking cargo that wasn't theirs, of Minoan jars showing up in markets where no Minoan ship had docked. You'd like to believe it's just trade confusion. But something in your gut says otherwise. Still, you don't panic. Your ship slows slightly. You order the amphory lashed tighter. You tell the crew to sit calmly. Make no sudden movements. There's no point in fighting, not because you're helpless, but because you're better than that. And yet, as the Mycenaean vessel draws near, you catch sight of their prow. It's been reinforced. Bronze-rimmed. And the men on deck armed. Just a scouting mission, perhaps. Or a warning. You hope. They circle once. No words exchanged. Just stares. One man spits overboard. Then, like a shadow slipping back beneath the waves, they turn away and disappear into the southern mist. Historians still argue whether the Minoans and Mycenaeans were allies, rivals, or something in between. Some say trade passed freely between them. Others claim the Mycenaeans eventually absorbed Minoan influence like a sponge drinking up oil. You're starting to suspect the sponge is already swelling. But you're not afraid. Not yet. Because you've learned to use silence like a blade. A different kind of defense. One that relies not on striking first, but on being too useful to strike at all. Still, you prepare. At your next port, a tiny harbor in the Dodecanese, you barter for extra ropes and a stronger rudder. You walk the market slowly, listening more than you speak. The talk is scattered, prices on tin are rising, Anatolian brigands have grown bolder, and someone swears the earth shook 2 nights ago near Thera. That gets your attention. Not because of superstition, but because of memory. You were in Thera once, years ago, when the ground rumbled so gently it felt like a cat walking across your chest. The locals laughed it off. But a week later, half the western cliff crumbled into the sea. That's the thing about the Aegean. It looks calm, until it isn't. You take the news back to your ship, scribble it into a clay tablet with quick strokes, linear A, of course. No one outside Crete will be able to read it, but that's fine. It's not for them. It's for Knossos. For the archivists who will log the tremor, compare it to the others, and perhaps, just perhaps, begin to sense a pattern. Because your people don't rely on walls or weapons. They rely on information. You stand at the prow that night, watching the stars pulse gently above the sea. Somewhere beneath the waves, tectonic plates shift. Trade routes drift. Powers rise. Powers prepare. But above all that, your sail still holds the wind. And your amphory still holds stories. In one of them is a sealed scroll from a trader in Byblos. You haven't opened it yet. The wax seal is still intact. But the mark on the outside, just a simple spiral with a dent, tells you it contains something sensitive. Maybe instructions. Maybe a warning. Maybe a favor returned. You leave it sealed for now. There's something comforting in not knowing just yet. And besides, you have a delivery to make. Your next stop is the Cyclades, where a merchant waits for your obsidian and your words. And maybe, just maybe, your help. Because in a world where ships collide without rams, where alliances shift without declarations, and where islands tremble from within, being useful isn't just good business. It's survival. The Cyclades greet you with that familiar blend of sunburned cliffs, goat chatter echoing through ravines, and a scent cocktail of grilled onions, salted fish, and, somehow, wet marble. You've docked in Naxos this time, an island whose loyalties shift as easily as sand in the wind. But for now, they're pro-Minoan. Very pro-Minoan, judging by the welcome party. 3 merchants in saffron cloaks meet you at the dock, all smiles and flattery. You're early, one of them says, clapping your shoulder like an old friend. And still the best-dressed foreigner in the sea. You offer your usual half-bow and your usual carefully wrapped jug of sweet olive oil. No papers. No proclamations. Just gifts. Because in the Cyclades, formality is suspicious. But generosity? That opens every door. You're led through sun-bleached alleys, past houses painted in Minoan motifs, spirals, dolphins, and that ever-present sacred bull. They're imitations, of course, but charming ones. You find yourself smiling at the irony. You've become a style export. A brand. And that's part of the plan. You reach the merchant house, low stone walls, deep shade, cool breeze, and settle into negotiations. You're here to secure 2 things. Obsidian from Milos and tin from somewhere even further west, passed from hand to hand like a myth. The obsidian part is easy. You've traded for it before. The tin, though? That's trickier. Your host pours wine and leans close. There's a new route, he says. Through the mainland. Mycenaean traders are offering better rates, but only to their own. You nod slowly. It was bound to happen. The Mycenaeans are expanding. Not with armies, yet, but with exclusivity. They've learned from you, and that's dangerous. Historians still argue whether Minoan diplomacy was undone by Mycenaean mimicry or Mycenaean aggression. Did they copy your methods to outmaneuver you? Or did they simply grow tired of soft gestures and decide sharp ones worked faster? You don't know. But you can feel something shifting. Not a collapse. Not yet. More like a breath being held. And you respond the only way you can, by remaining indispensable. You tell the merchant, the mainlanders may offer good tin, but can they guarantee Thera's saffron? Or Knossos' dye? He hesitates. He knows the answer. No one else has your network. For now, you strike a deal, some obsidian, some tin, and a quiet promise to carry a sealed pouch to Amorgos. No questions asked. That's diplomacy too. You sleep that night under a woven net canopy, listening to the wind whisper through stone alleys. You dream of bulls leaping across waves and of amphorae spilling open to reveal not oil, but whispers. The next morning, you're up before the goats. Your ship is ready. Your crew quiet. Your direction clear. But just before you leave, a boy runs up to the dock. Barefoot, holding a shard of painted pottery. It's part of a Minoan bowl, one you traded here seasons ago. He says, my mother keeps this on the altar. You take it. The edge is sharp. The glaze still vibrant. You run your thumb across the spiral pattern and nod, because that's the real power of your diplomacy. It doesn't just move goods. It lodges in memory. The waves stretch long and low as your ship cuts westward, gliding toward the Peloponnese, the jagged, lion mud peninsula of the mainland. It's different here. The sea feels colder. The wind less cooperative. Even the seagulls scream with a little more urgency. And the harbors? Less welcoming. You arrive at a port near Pylos, low on wine and high on caution. The Mycenaeans are not your enemies. Not officially. But something about the way they eye your ship, like a borang in unattended spit, makes your stomach tighten. You're here for timber, a precious resource that your island can't provide in bulk. Mycenaean oaks are tall, strong, and deeply rooted in diplomacy of the gritted teeth kind. You'll need to be careful. You dock in silence. No one greets you. Instead, two bronze-clad men flank the harbor entrance like mismatched bookends. One taps the hilt of his sword as your crew unloads amphorae. The other just stares. A man finally approaches, broad-shouldered, red-faced, with hands like cracked leather. He says nothing at first, just sniffs. Then, what are you carrying? You tell him. You'll need to wait, he says. No explanation. No smile. Just the efficient bureaucracy of someone who doesn't need to charm to get what he wants. You nod. Patience is a Minoan virtue. But the message is clear. You're not in charge here. Back on the ship, Aretas sits with arms folded. They don't like us, he mutters. You shrug. They don't have to like us. They just have to trade. But even as you say it, you feel the balance has shifted. Not long ago, the mainlanders begged for your perfumes, your dyes, your delicate figurines. Now they make their own. Cruder, sure, but cheaper. More pointy. You walk the market streets, noting the differences. The stalls are stacked with goods that once would have been uniquely Minoan. Now you see Minoan-style pottery with hard angles and stiffer spirals. You see tunics with thread counts so high they practically scratch you with every step. One merchant even waves a jar of Cretan-style oil at you. You sniff it. It smells like donkey sweat and moss. You don't buy it, but it doesn't matter. People are buying it. Historians still argue whether this period marked the rise of Mycenaean independence or the start of their cultural theft. You just call it competition. You meet with the timber broker in a narrow stone courtyard. He's younger than you expected, with sharp eyes and a smile that never reaches them. You Minoans like stories, right? He says, lounging. You nod. Depends on the ending. He laughs and then says, here's one. A king from Crete once came here and told our ancestors how to trade. We listened. We learned. Now we don't need him. You offer a tight smile. He must have been a good teacher. The timber deal happens, but it's transactional, not relational. No wine. No shared feasts. No dances or compliments. Just wood and weights and silence. You leave with the logs, but not with peace. As your ship pulls away, you watch the harbor recede behind you. The guards don't wave. The market smells like ambition. And you realize something uncomfortable: they're not just learning your ways, they're preparing to outgrow them. And someday, soon, they might not need your jars, just your route maps. Your ship creaks under the weight of timber logs lashed to the deck like sleeping giants. The wind is gentle but steady, and the sea, bless her, remains calm. For now. You're sailing south again. But not home just yet. There's one more stop before Crete, tiny, volcanic Melos, the island where the best obsidian in the world sleeps inside stone. You've bartered for Melian obsidian before. Harder than flint, sharper than bronze when chipped correctly. A blade that can whisper through hide or hair with no more than a sigh. You don't use it for war, of course. You use it for scalpels, for art, for trade. But lately, you've heard whispers. The Mycenaeans want the quarry. Not the obsidian, the quarry. The entire operation. It's not a rumor you like. Still, when you dock at Melos, the town is still familiar: low walls, lazy goats, small boys throwing stones at seagulls. The scent of sulfur, stone dust, and roasting chickpeas drifts on the breeze. You're met by Damaris, a Melian trader with a voice like gravel and the posture of a man who's spent too much time standing in wind. He nods at your logs. You've been to Pylos, he says, not quite asking. You nod. They're getting sharper. He sighs. They want everything now. They don't ask. They just measure. That about sums it up. He leads you up the rocky path to the edge of the obsidian field. You've walked it before, black glass half buried in dusty soil, glittering like frost. But this time, there are guards. Not Minoan. And not Melian either. Mycenaean. Two of them. Swords at their sides, eyes narrowed. Damaris shrugs. They're advisors. You don't reply. But you clench your jaw hard enough to taste salt. Historians still argue whether the Minoan hold on Melos was formal or symbolic. Whether it was trade-based, spiritual, or merely habitual. You've always felt it was a matter of affection. Melos liked Crete. Trusted Crete. Until someone offered it a better deal. And now you're here to offer one better still. You sit with Damaris that evening, sharing wine under the stars. He pours slowly, glancing at the two figures near the edge of the firelight. They're watching everything, he murmurs. Even what you drink. You pass him a small jar wrapped in cloth. Inside, Minoan incense. A blend of pine, crushed hieros root, and dried seaweed. It smells like rain and clean stone and temples at sunrise. Remind them who taught you to trade, you say. He nods. It's not a weapon, but it is a memory. You strike a deal, some obsidian, not all, and a promise of exclusivity for 3 moons. After that? No one knows, but for now, it's yours. As you leave Melos, you feel the shift in the wind. The island looks the same. But its loyalty no longer feels anchored. It's tethered by one fraying rope, and you're the one holding the end. You spend the evening reviewing your ship's stores. Timber. Papyrus. Obsidian. Oil. Saffron. Letters. Scrolls. One tiny wooden figurine carved by a child in Thera, stuffed in a pouch beside the sealed note from Byblos. And then you see it. A new jug. Mycenaean style. Not part of your cargo. Someone tucked it aboard. You lift the lid. Inside, packed in linen, is a small bronze blade. No note, just an object. A message. You're not sure if it's a threat, a gift, or a warning, but you hold it a long time. Long enough to feel the weight of what's coming. You wake in the soft lull before dawn, that sacred silence when the stars haven't yet packed up and the sea murmurs low and hushed against your hull. The Mycenaean blade is still wrapped in linen, still tucked beneath your bench, and still very much on your mind. You haven't told Erataz, not yet. Instead, you order the crew to raise sail quietly. No singing this morning. No lazy stretches or teasing over boiled barley. Just quiet work and the rhythmic thud of sandals on wood. Because now, even home feels far away. Crete lies just beyond the horizon, a hazy promise of red pillars, soft courtyards, and open air, but something's shifted in the wind. You feel it. And when you finally catch sight of the coast near Knossos, your chest tightens. There's smoke. Not plumes. Not flames. But a haze, low, persistent, oily. You dock at a minor port first, not the central harbor. It's standard practice for diplomatic couriers like you. Test the shoreline before delivering delicate news or precious cargo. The dockmaster meets you with familiar warmth but restless eyes. What's the news? You ask. He hesitates. Then, there was a fire. Small. But in the palace storehouses. You exhale, then inhale sharply. Not war. But not nothing. Was it sabotage? He shrugs. Some say lightning. Some say careless hands. Some Say spies. He doesn't have to say who spies. You offload the Egyptian wheat. It smells faintly toasted, but that might be your nerves. Then, slowly, you make your way inland toward Knossos. The roads are quieter than usual. No dancers. No flute-playing boys. Just traders hauling jars, and oxen pulling carts of damaged timber. When you reach the edge of the palace, you see the truth. The damage isn't widespread. The palace still stands, its pillars red and regal, its walls breathing murals of dolphins and blue-skinned priestesses. But the western storerooms? Charred. The clay seals melted. The tablets scorched. Information lost. That's the true cost. Knossos isn't about walls or swords. It's about memory. And now, some of that memory is ash. Historians still argue whether the fire was a warning, a freak accident, or the opening volley in something larger. Some believe it was natural, lightning or heat. Others insist Mycenaean involvement. You've no proof. But the weight of the bronze blade under your tunic makes you lean one way. You're ushered into the Hall of Archives, where the remaining tablets are being sorted and recatalogued. One scribe, old, oil-smudged, and half-blind, grips your forearm. "Did you bring tin?" he asks. You nod. He exhales. "Then we can still make more tools." "That's good. That's good." You deliver the sealed scroll from Byblos. The lead scribe eyes it like a priest inspecting prophecy. "We'll decipher it," he says, despite knowing full well it's written in a dialect none of you truly speak. "It doesn't matter. You'll get the gist." You always do. You step outside, and there, beneath a fig tree, is someone you didn't expect. Her name is Thessa. She's a fellow diplomat. Minoan by birth, but rarely on Crete. Last you heard, she was in Ugarit, learning Akkadian, charming nobles with a laugh sharp as pomegranate seeds. She looks tired. "There's talk," she says. "Talk of ships being built. On the mainland." "Mycenae?" you ask. She nods. You wait. "There's more. Some say they've begun copying our ship designs. Our storage systems. Even our linen folds." You laugh once, bitterly. "Do they leap bulls yet?" Thessa doesn't smile. "Not yet. But they've begun digging into our myths." That lands harder than you'd like to admit, because diplomacy isn't just gifts and trade routes. It's stories. If the Mycenaeans are claiming those now, then they aren't just trading with you. They're preparing to replace you. That evening, you walk the palace grounds alone. Past the quiet pools. The silent colonnades. The wall where once a boy painted flying fish in colors the sea had never truly held. And you wonder, can something without walls ever stand forever? You stop near the central court and look toward the hills. There are no torches, no war drums, not yet. But in your pouch is a blade. And you know why it's there. Knossos breathes differently now. The palace used to hum with quiet confidence, the kind of rhythm you barely noticed, like the lap of waves or the faint sigh of fig leaves in wind. But not anymore. The confidence is still there, sure. But it has shifted tone. From gentle hum to low murmur. Less lullaby. More warning. You spend your days consulting with scribes, traders, temple stewards. The damage to the storerooms wasn't just physical, it erased records of trade schedules, harvest forecasts, even some inventories of sacred offerings. You don't say it aloud, but everyone knows, when the tablets burn, the future burns a little with them. You help rebuild. Not with bricks, you're no mason, but with routes. You dictate new tallies to young scribes, showing them how to encode shipments in linear A. You send word to Thera, to Melos, to Damaris on windswept cliffs. You remind them, tactfully, that Knossos still holds the web. But in every port, the pattern is clearer. Your web is fraying. Melos now trades obsidian with both you and the mainland. Thera flirts with Mycenaean grain markets. Even Cyprus, old, trusted Cyprus, sent a clay tablet last week marked in a foreign script. Linear B. Not yours. Not friendly. The scribes pretend it's no big deal. It's just a more efficient system, one mutters. They're probably just using it for accounting. You stare at the tablet anyway and wonder what else they're accounting for. Historians still argue whether Linear B's rise was a sign of cultural evolution or cultural theft. After all, it copies parts of your Linear A, clumsily, but effectively, and adapts them to the Greek tongue. Some call it innovation. You call it warning, because if they're copying your language, what stops them from copying your voice? One afternoon, you walk through the Grand Hall, the heart of Knossos. Sunlight pours through high windows onto faded murals, bull leapers, dancers, fishers casting nets of gold. You remember when you were a child, staring up at these images, thinking they were stories carved in stone. Now you realize, they're promises of what was. Of what still might be. You pause beneath the image of the Prince of the Lilies, his long arms lifted in ceremonial gesture, crown of feathers and flowers like a silent flame. He doesn't look afraid. But he also doesn't blink. You wonder what he would do now. That night, you dine with the high priestess. Not in the temple, but in her quarters, a long, dark room filled with cushions, smoke, and the scent of burned honey. She sits in shadows, her fingers twined around a bowl of hot milk and barley. "We are still powerful," she says. You nod. "But so are they," you answer. She doesn't flinch. "They are loud," she says. "We are deep." Then she leans forward. "We do not need to conquer. We need only endure." You leave the palace with that echoing in your head. Endure. You don't sleep much. Instead, you sort amphorae by moonlight, preparing a shipment that must leave before dawn. Not for profit, but for presence. Every jug, every jar, every painted dolphin carries more than oil or grain. It carries memory. And the more memory you send out, the longer your story lingers. As your crew finishes loading, Aretas finds you by the prow. "We're being followed," he says. "By who?" He shrugs. "A ship with no sails. Just shadows." He's always had a dramatic streak. But still, you pack the bronze blade. Not to use. Just to carry. Because maybe the priestess is right. You don't need to conquer. You just need to be there when the world remembers who you were. The sun barely crests the sea when your ship pulls out of Knossos again. Sails crisp and catching just enough wind to pull you gently into the haze. You're not headed to Thera, or Melos, or even the mainland this time. You're going to Carpathos, small, rocky, and easily overlooked. But that's the point. It's not the richest island. Not the loudest. But its position? Strategic. Like a knuckle holding the wrist of the Eastern Aegean. From there, you can whisper in every direction, to Rhodes, to Anatolia, even as far as Cyprus if you squint. You arrive mid-afternoon, docking beside a half-empty quay. The harbor is quieter than usual. Fewer sails. Fewer fish. But a pair of familiar faces greet you, a merchant named Halon, and his daughter, Archaea, barefoot, bold-eyed, and already arguing with a local fisherman. You smile. Archaea once threw a basket of figs at a Mycenaean diplomat. You liked her immediately. "Halon," you say, handing him a jug of garlic oil wrapped in linen. "Fresh from the Knosson hills?" He nods. "And what does Knossos want in return?" "Loyalty," you say. He laughs. Then stops laughing, because even he knows it isn't really a joke anymore. You sit in his shaded courtyard that evening, a plate of lentils between you, and explain the latest developments, the fire, the blade, the slow tilt of Mycenaean ambition. "They're building more ships," you say. "Not for trade. For movement." Halon frowns. "They'll say it's for protection." "They always do." You show him the linear B tablet. He holds it like a dead bird. Tilts it. Tries to find the beauty. Fails. "This doesn't sing," he says. You nod. "It's not meant to." You walk to the beach before sleep, the tide soft against your toes. Archaea appears beside you, holding a painted jug. "Your style," she says. "But I made it." You take it gently. Spirals in turquoise and red. A dolphin, but boxier than usual. "It's beautiful," you say. She grins. "It leaks." You both laugh. But then she asks, "Will they take everything?" You shake your head. "They'll take what's useful," you say. "But they won't know how to use all of it." "Then what do we do?" You think for a long time. "Keep making things that leak," you say, "because if you can't control what others steal, you can at least make sure what they take is incomplete." Historians still argue whether this late Minoan period was a slow unraveling or a quiet resistance. Whether the power faded or simply adapted. You've begun to see it as a kind of scattering, like seeds cast into wind. Some land, some vanish, some take root in unlikely soil. Before you leave Carpathos, Halon gives you a letter wrapped in oilcloth. "For a man in Rhodes," he says. He's listening. You tuck it beside the bronze blade. And you sail again. Not for glory, not even for profit, but because movement is memory. And you refuse to be forgotten. The wind is warm as your ship glides homeward for the last time in a long season. Knossos awaits beyond the silver horizon, its cliffs still kissed by morning mist, its temple roofs glinting like copper teeth in sunlight. You know the shapes by heart. Even the gulls feel like old friends now, circling lazily overhead like they've been watching you from the start. But this return is different. There is no triumph in the hull. No rare purple dye, no cedar from Byblos, no tin from the edge of the world. What you bring now is weightless. You bring whispers and warnings. Your ship docks at a quieter harbor, one of the lesser piers used for private arrivals. No drums. No greetings. Just the creak of wet rope and the rhythmic slap of waves against the hull. A page meets you at the dock, no older than 14, robes too clean, too stiff. He bows, then mutters, "You're expected." Expected. You were always expected. But this time, it feels heavy. They lead you not to the grand hall, but to the south wing. Through winding corridors of painted walls, past frescoes of monkeys and lilies and musicians with flutes frozen at their lips. Beautiful, yes, but strangely still. Like the palace is holding its breath. In a side chamber, you find the circle of trade, a semicircle of stone benches occupied by temple stewards, scribes, and a few faces you don't recognize. One wears a Mycenaean cloak. You suppress a flicker of unease. The head scribe gestures for you to speak. So you do. You speak of Melos, of Carpathos, of the blade, of the linear B tablet. You even tell them about Archaea's leaking jar. Some chuckle. Others don't. One leans forward and says, "What would you have us do?" It's the question you've been asking yourself since Melos. You could say, build ships. You could say, close the ports. You could say, make alliances, draw lines in the sand, prepare for war. But instead, you say, remember who we are. They wait. So you continue. We don't conquer. We don't invade. But we endure. Our language is soft, but it flows. Our walls are painted, not stacked. Our diplomacy is not loud, but it echoes. Someone scoffs, but another nods. Later, as the council disperses, the head scribe stops beside you and whispers, "They fear silence more than swords." You don't answer, but you remember it. That night, you return to your small home on the eastern edge of Knossos. You set the bronze blade on a low altar beside your trading seals and the faded pouch from Byblos. You light a lamp. The flame flutters. You sit and you write. Not an official record, not a letter, but a story. In linear A, spirals and wedges, dots and curves. A language almost no one else understands. You write of sails and smiles, of oil and fire, of islands that dream even when they burn. You write of yourself because someone, someday, might find this. And remember that before the world changed, Minoans moved without marching, spoke without shouting, and made history with nothing more than soft hands, open jars, and painted silence. You lean back from the table as the ink dries, feeling the stiffness in your shoulders, the hush in your spine. Outside, the cicadas begin their slow, sleepy clicking. Somewhere, a night bird calls once, then falls quiet again. The city of Knossos has settled into its nocturne rhythm. You light one more lamp. Its glow is soft, golden, flickering against the walls. It casts long shadows from your shelves, your scrolls, your artifacts gathered over a dozen journeys across the sea. You run a hand along one of the painted amphorae. The surface is cool, smooth, familiar. Tomorrow, there may be questions again. More ships from the mainland. More uncertain guests. More decisions wrapped in silk and ceremony. But for now, you breathe. You rest. You listen to the hush of wind through reed shutters, and the faint, far-off murmur of waves tugging at the shore. And slowly, very slowly, your thoughts begin to blur and soften, like ink smudging into papyrus. The worries of diplomacy dissolve. The pulse of history fades into calm. And as your eyes begin to close, you know, you've done enough. For now, sleep comes easily. Because silence, after all, was always your greatest strength.
Tới đây luôn á. Máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh. chớp nhán nhán được rồi. Nó dàn tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh. Thì chớp chớp nhán nhán.